Greetings everyone, I am Dimitrik and welcome to today's episode of Fryderykraft. If you watched the previous episode, you know that it did snow a little bit in Ericton, as well as us putting up all these lovely, festive, colorful decorations throughout the city, making it explode in light and color. But unfortunately, warm, happy winter is over, and it's now time for sad, cold winter. So unfortunately, these decorations will have to go. But before we continue on with removing all the decorations, I would like to give one final look of the city while it is still in its festive splendor. And as night falls, we can take a walk through the tranquil streets during this winter season, where we arrive at the city's main square with its massive tree in the center. If you look up, you can see that the spires of the city hall are finally turning green after a long time. Here is our massive tree, which we first built this year. This is the first year we actually had a tree in the main square of the city, which was always the goal of the main square, but we just never got around to doing it in the previous years. And turning onto Fleming Street into the old town, we have these lovely little uh, streamers, maybe, with these bells and these intertwining mangrove and pale oak signs, which create this red, white pattern, which I really enjoy and will be using next year for its Christmas decorations. We have some nice bushels of holly on the balconies up there, and then we walk into Pensworth Square with its classic tree, which has gone up for most years except for the 2024 Christmas, where we all forgot Eric's was happening, but that's okay. This one is a server-wide favorite, as this was the traditional spot of having presents here. And it looks very nice with the gate up there, having some nice verticality to the city, drawing your eyes up to the sky. Finally, coming down to over here, we pass by the bells on Axing Street till we arrive at Brick Square with the old City Hall and this tree right here, which is a little bit more natural looking, a bit more droopy, and a bit more rough around the edges, but that is part of its natural charm. We're sitting right in front of the old City Hall, looking very nice. And as a bonus, we will be crossing the bridge over onto the island of Glessing, where if we pass by through this narrow alleyway next to the Church of Matrick Patrick, we arrive in this square where you might find this peculiar out-of-place stump. Well, this was the Glessing Christmas tree, where in, I believe, 2022, there was a tree right here, but unfortunately, due to uh, antisocial activity, there was a case of arson in this neighborhood of the city, and the tree burned down, and this stands as a memorial to the tree that once stood here, as a reminder that we cannot have nice things, unfortunately. Nevertheless, most of Glessing was demolished and rebuilt in a little bit more gentrified style, but don't worry, we do still have some houses back here which are a little bit more affordable and might even be even more affordable if you take your crossbow out in the middle of the night and charge up a fire. The rent in Eric is getting a little bit too high. And with the sun coming up, I think it is time for us to take our decorations and begin to put them back into holiday storage. And up here on top of the skyscraper, you notice that over there in the corner, there's this laggard of a spire, which seems to have not gotten the memo that it is time to be turning green. But now we are getting distracted. We must continue with taking down the decorations and resuming to a normal yet snowy Ericton. Now the decorations have been taken down and the city has returned relatively to its standard look, albeit a little bit more white. And even though it may be a little sad to see all the colors and lights go, fear not, as they will be returning later this year. So now we can focus on the main part of this episode where, passing by the central square of the city, we walk into the old town with its narrow, quaint streets through this major shopping street known as Fleming Street, where, walking down, we arrive at Pensworth Square right up ahead over here, where it's named after the Pensworth Gate, which actually is not in the neighborhood of Pensworth, but it does lead to the neighborhood, which is over here. But over here is the Pensworth Gate. It is one of the remaining parts of the old city wall that used to encompass the whole city. And whilst it is a major landmark for the city, I don't think I've ever showed you the inside, and don't be shocked, it is a bit underwhelming, but coming in, it is a little bit disorganized with some storage for later, ignore that. But coming up here, you can see that this is actually my storage for the city, where I have some relatively organized storage containers such as barrels and chests, where there's a general idea on the theme of what gets stored in each chest, as this one's filled with white blocks, this one is filled with oak, but this is a very small and relatively cluttered storage system. So what I would like to do in this episode is build an actual proper storage system. So what will we be doing for this? Well, you see, we'll be completely moving all the storage from Pensworth Gate into a new warehouse district. But before we can do that, we must acquire some resources. So I will be entering the station right here so that we can go grab some dirt. And coming out of the portal, we are greeted with the Nether Hub, which I rarely ever show on camera, as usually I stay within one area for an episode, but today I decided to bring you along with me for my adventures. So, entering the Nether, we have the chest where we don't touch. It originally started where one of the members placed their items into a chest and told us not to touch it, but obviously we have since touched it. But moving on, we're getting a little bit carried away. We must go take the west tunnel around 700 blocks down this way to arrive at the dirt mining area. And it is time to turn around, as I have forgotten the shulker boxes necessary to store all the dirt I will be taking home. Sufficient storage acquired. Anyways, as we pull into this branch off of the main tunnel, we will soon get to our destination. The portal should be right up ahead. And stepping out our portal, we are greeted with this desolate, rocky land that we have laid waste to, which used to be a natural plains biome that we have since stripped of its dirt over the years for infill and land reclamation projects, showing our contempt for the natural environment. But hey, it is not all that bad, as over there we do have this pretty pink Princess Pavilion off in the distance for the miners to take their breaks in. But now that we are here, it's time for us to grab our dirt shovel and begin mining away to get some more dirt to complete today's project. And after a couple hours, our mining is complete, where we have filled all of these 11 shulker boxes up with dirt, ready to be taken back to Ericton for some land reclamation. So I will go ahead and mine these up. And even though this may seem like a lot of dirt, it pales in comparison to how much has already been mined here. Yet, nevertheless, the Sea of Stone forever expands as the city grows. So let us head back to the main area. Now, I almost forgot, but before we continue with building up our city, we must go ahead and mend our dirt shovel, as it has taken a little bit of a beating from the numerous shulker boxes mined in our little mining mission. So, going from far to the west, we must go to the Experience Farm, which is far to the east, so passing by the crossroads of the Nether Hub. We now go eastwards where the Experience Farm is, which I do not think I've shown on camera, but it is pretty cool, so I would like to finally show it to you guys. And turning the corner around x equals 900, we enter this branch off of the east tunnel over here, which takes us to Guardians and Grimoires Experience Farm. If you watched the last episode, you know that Guardians and Grimoires is the name of the Guardian, the Prismarine and Enchanted Bookshop, which combine to in one shop so that you can get both of the books and your experience all in one go, which is why those two seemingly unrelated items are grouped together in the store. And as we come out this portal, we are greeted with this very lovely Roman bathhouse. But do not be fooled, this is no ancient marvel. This is an industrial experience farm with lots of machinery underneath. This is all just a facade. Or I guess this is more of the interior, so technically not a facade. But how it works is there is some leftover experience from the last time I was here, as I did have to mend the shovel a couple times whilst I was mining all that dirt. So how it works is this lever turns on the farm, which is actually underneath us. As you can see, we are at Y level 88, which is a little bit above the sea level. So what happens is the farm underneath starts killing the guardians, and you get this little laser light show. Don't worry though, you cannot actually get hurt from this, as the guardians die way too quickly, but eventually what happens is the experience comes raining down through this dome right here and drops into this pool where you can swim around and enjoy a nice time. Here we have some complementary anvils for anyone wishing to do enchanting, and we have a fire to get rid of items. But here we go, we have some XP raining down from the top of the dome, the blessings of Neptune pouring down onto us. I do have a secret lever here, where the back rooms of the farm are accessible, where whenever the guardians drop their items, they end up all over here, and down there is the entrance to the actual farm. In the past, this was closed off to the public, but recently, and by recently, around 2 years ago, there have been some changes to where the common folk may enter this area of the farm, as every time you throw a trident into the trident killer down there to get the XP, it only gives XP as so long as the person who threw the trident is online. So to allow for offline use of the experience farm, anyone can go back there and rethrow all the tridents, so they may use this farm as they wish. And all of my tools are repaired, so I will leave this for the next person, so they will not have to wait as long. And it's time for us to return to the city. Arriving back at the central hub, we may now go back to the city of Ericton, where I don't think I have explained this before, but around 2 to 3 years ago, in 2023, during the... Oh my, this was 4 years ago at this point. In 2022, when the swamp update came out with the ancient cities, we did capture a warden and bring him to the nether, where we built this enclosure for him, and There's a chest in here to mimic an ancient city, but this was more just a zoo exhibit where we had a warden in here, and he was just the friendly neighborhood warden who would terrorize the people who would take the Nether for transportation. But unfortunately, a couple years ago, he did unfortunately die mysteriously, where we have these uh, blue wool blocks right here as some forensic investigation to what may have occurred. These look like explosions. The what happened is still a mystery, but we do miss Hell Warden dearly, so that is a little bit of an explanation on what this cage over here was, in case you guys wanted to know that. But now to our regularly scheduled building. And now that we are back in the beautiful city of Ericton, where coming out of the train station, everyone who arrives is immediately greeted by the wonderful, beautiful Pensworth Gate that leads us to the old town, which we are clearing out in this episode. And maybe the municipal government may use it as a tourist destination and milk it for tourist money. But back to our building plans, we will now head over to the drawing room. Here we are in the Ericton Urban Planning Commission, which is in the Wren Street offices right here in the central business district of the city, where if you remember earlier in the episode where we gathered all this dirt, we'll be doing some land reclamation, where today's work will be done over here in the neighborhood of Pensworth, where we have the Pensworth Gate and the Pensworth train station to the south of it. Well, today, with all the dirt we gathered, we'll be building a harbor district where, to the south of the train station, I would like to fill this in and build a nice wharf. And if we get to it, we will have some piers sticking out into the ocean for boats to dock at. Now, this is a little bit of an outdated map, as over here we did do some buildings on the southern side of High Pensworth Street, but it remains mostly the same, so we will be filling in right here. You may notice this little dirt clump at the bottom, and that is the Ericton junkyard, which is where we dump all our unused materials when we don't have a flint and steel around, and where all the trash cans provided by El the Star get dumped into. So now for some site assessment. And now we have the entirety of the dirt filled in, and if you have eyes, as I do, you will be able to tell that it looks very ugly, but worry not, as oftentimes amidst the middle of a project, it does look rather unsightly, and we must just trust the process. The same thing happened as I was regretting every single second of redeveloping Glessing until I actually started building the buildings and it turned out to be nice. So we will do the same here, where right now it does not look the greatest, but once it is complete, it will be very wonderful and a nice addition to the city. So the next thing we will be doing in constructing the harbor is I will get some stone and lay it on top of the dirt so we have an area to walk on top of and build onto, as well as building a wall against this elevated part right here so it's not just floating dirt held up by nothing. And if you take a look over here, there is a train line. We go onto the train station where there is supposed to be an elevated viaduct which is supposed to be going westwards over here. So what I would like to do is to also extend this filled in area of dirt a little bit more this way so we have space to build our viaduct when we do get to that, and of course build a wall along that as well. So that is my plans for the next phase of development in the Pensworth Harbor District, and I will come back once that is complete. And here we are atop our first green spire of the Ericton City Hall, where we can overlook the sea and our harbor district, where this was actually a not so good place for me to perch, as you can barely see the progress that I have done, though you can see that I have paved over the wharf over there. So if we are to come down, you can see that we now have this official stairway down to the wharf, where you can see that we have this lovely arched stone retaining wall with these beautiful stone buttresses on them, holding up our future rail viaduct, which will go that way towards the city hall and off into the peninsular area of our city, which we haven't expanded to yet, but in the future we will. So here we have this beautiful arched wall, and no longer is the train station standing on just a mound of dirt as it once was. We now have this nice stone wall with some wider arches. These ones sort of match the windows up there, these arches with the same width, and it does curve along the edge right here, which I think is a very nice detail. Eventually we'll have another staircase coming up here to get to the main area of the Pensworth Square on the Pensworth side. But coming back over here, it is getting close to nighttime, so I will have to sleep. But before we do that, I will like to show you guys this lovely sunset along the harbor right here, where we have some beautiful buildings overlooking the ocean. Such grandeur. Beautiful. And good morning. It is now time for us to get straight back to work. So my plan for this harbor area is I plan to have 3 piers extending from the wharf right here, none of which we will be building today, but I will like to outline them so I know where I would like to build the warehouses. So I would like to have one right here on this edge, one over here in the middle, and the last one will be over here where we will extend the harbor a little bit this way, but this will be not a one for shipping cargo, but rather a passenger ferry terminal, but that will come at a later date as this episode only concerns warehouses. So if I remember correctly, the distance from over here to the edge of the wharf over there is around 140 blocks, which leaves me 4 sets of 35 for me to build my piers and docks out of. So we will have a 35 block area here where we will have an extension into the water, and then a 35 block area where the water comes in towards us, where the ships will be able to park, or I guess dock. And in the area where the ships will be, so where the water is here instead of the pier, we will have our warehouses so that smaller ships that are able to go horizontally are able to dock right up next to it and maybe have some cargo taken up into it. So it will end up looking a little something like this, where we have this dirt here to outline where it goes, where the alternations show where the pier will go and where the harbor will go into it. So over here it will stick out into the water, and here will come over here. So over here will be where will be building our warehouses in the areas where the water will be. So what I would like to do is I would like to have a small walkway in between the main warehouses and the water so workers can get through, and the warehouses will go a little bit into the area where the piers stick out into the water, but not too far so that you are able to fit cargo through in between the warehouses so you can get them to the rail yards over here. And for the warehouses, we will be building some magnificent old brick warehouses, maybe something you might be able to see in like the Speicherstadt in Hamburg, for an example, and it will just be a very nice, quaint area. Maybe not quaint now, as this is a time where the workers will be working, but it'll be very lovely and will be very large for us to store all our items. So I have gone ahead and laid out the general outline for the warehouse buildings where the walls and windows will be going, and I may or may not be extending each of the warehouses out by 1 block, so we have a little bit more interior floor space. Now, the buildings here are very symmetrical and a little bit repetitive, but that is a little bit of the point, as they are industrial buildings that are meant to be built to serve a function of storage rather than appearance, but I will make sure to make them look nice. Now, it does come with very sadness for me to announce that we will have to be destroying the junkyard. Now, the Ericton Trash Island was a very important historical site in the city, pioneered by L the Star. The Trash Island served as a place for players to dump their miscellaneous items instead of littering them on their street. L the Star also pioneered the vast array of rubbish bins found throughout the city streets so that people will have a place to put their unwanted items, which would then be taken to the trash island every now and then. But unfortunately, it is time for us to build the port in this area, but worry not, as maybe one day the trash island can move to a different island of trash. That is not a hint in the slightest. Glessing is a wonderful island and is not rubbish at all. But it is now time for us to get started on building our warehouses, so I will do exactly that and come back when they have been completed. And now that some time has passed, construction has concluded, and it is now spring, where the snow around us is slowly beginning to melt, welcoming this new season. And as we welcome the new season, we can welcome our new warehouses, which have just now been built. So taking a walk down the street next to the City Hall, where we have some access to our new harbor district, we can now see our new two massive, beautiful warehouses. So what we have here is these massive, tall brick edifices where we have many floors for lots of capacity for storage, where if you look closely, we even have some cranes up there, so you're able to raise crates from the sea from your boat to one of the upper layers, and whenever you are ready to take it down as cargo to be shipped somewhere else, you have this crane down here to lower it back down. Likewise, this also has a crane, but albeit it only has one on each side, but is still a lovely warehouse nonetheless. Now, I have not seen this in a while. It has begun to rain, which hasn't happened in several months, as we do turn the weather cycle off in order to have the snow for the winter, so it is a little bit refreshing and calming to see rain once again. But now I would like to take a look at the warehouses from a little bit of a distance. So viewing from the sea, if we take a look at our warehouses, we can see that we have these beautiful, tall, thin gables up at the top here, which are holding up our cranes, which has these very large, thick windows so that you're able to fit the crates through. The ships will dock right here, and the cranes will be able to raise and lower and whatnot. And going on to this building over here, have these corner towers, which I really like, and we have some arched windows. This one has a little bit more arched windows. I have also used this technique of using trapdoors in order to separate the window into two sections. I did want to make an impression that these were two skinny windows instead of one large window being split into two, but that is up to your interpretation with your own perspective. Now, I haven't done the interior to that building over there, but this first one has been furnished, so let us take a look at our new warehouse. So, walking alongside our train station, we have our warehouse right here, where, mind the ground floor, it is a little bit incomplete, as I was intending to use the upper floors for this video. So coming up to here, where we have our interior done, we have these hallways with many barrels, This is here and here. We do have this large room in the middle where our crane is, so that there is ample space to be able to raise, lower, and move cargo throughout the building. Have some more storage halls over here. Have another staircase on this side, matching the other side over there where we had this little 3-block wide section. And we do have some smaller rooms off to the side, which may be rented out for private use, as I did build this building to have some resources that are going to be used by the government-funded builds. But anyone can rent out these buildings if they have any storage needs. Going one floor up, we have the exact same layout with the barrels and the rooms to the sides and the large room in the middle. Now, I did get a little bit lazy and only did 2 of the layers because that is what was needed at the time. But we do have a lot more stores than we do have in the gate. Now, one thing about the gate is that we had about maybe 8 chests total, and they would all be like a category. So we'd have like the white chest with all the bone blocks and quartz and whatnot, and we had the brick chest with the bricks, the dripstone, the granite, all that color. But now we have enough barrels to where we can designate each barrel to one specific type of item. So instead of shoving all the stone, deep slate, andesite into one chest, we are able to separate them out so we have more efficient storage and more organized. And yeah, so last thing I would like to do is go into the gate, take out some of the items, and move them over into this warehouse. Now, this right here is exactly what I was talking about before, where in this chest we have an entire mishmash of all blocks that have one thing in common, to where it'd be very hard to say if I wanted to find quartz, I'd have to go look into all of these different shulker boxes to finally find what I was truly looking for. So with moving the storage into the warehouses back there, we are finally able to have more efficient use, and you can see these are all the chests we have, as well as this clutter of barrels in the back here. So I will finally be able to clear out the gate, and maybe we can convert it into a museum into later episodes. As this is a very historic and important site for the city, but I am getting carried away and must begin the transferring. And I am here after the great transferring, where if we take a look into each of our chests in this lovely gate of ours, we find them all to be completely gutted, as we have transferred them all into our warehouse over there, which is much nicer, as this was a very inefficient and disorganized storage system. Each chest was a patchwork of miscellaneous items that were of varying degrees of commonality with each other, which contrasts with our new storage system over off in this direction. In the port, we have our warehouse, where this one's the main public warehouse, where if we go in, we can see that we have a much more organized array of items over here, where we have, for example, all the white blocks before were all in one chest, but now I have them all spread out into their own different categories, such as bone blocks, quartz, wallpapers, and whatnot, and have much more space dedicated to each their own item. And I've also taken some creativity into naming items for what I typically use them for versus what the actual Minecraft item is. So, for example, we have sets right here, which is our deep slate, as we use them as cobblestones to pave our roads. Or we also have the brown blocks all together. And going upstairs, we have another layer where I have some less used items that I have stored all together. So we have copper in this chest, and we have a gold chest and fool's gold, miscellaneous black blocks, as these are less common, but I will still use them from time to time, but not important enough to be down here where my stone and brick and birch and other commonly used blocks are. So I am very proud of my work in my storage management in this episode, as this was long overdue. In fact, I first planned on making this storage district in, I believe, 2023 when I made that promenade video. The video that was the first one to take place in a snowy Ericton, where I built this section of the promenade right here, right by the Atlas House, which was completed in video that came shortly before that. But here was the promenade, and I wanted to make a storage system which was much more efficient, and I wanted to do some more work by the water, which I really enjoyed, as this created a nice waterfront back in video before. We didn't quite have these benches yet. That came in the City Beautiful episode. But it was very nice to have an area by the water, and I wanted to make a port district to make the city a little more boat accessible, as I do really like using boats to get around in the server from time to time. But enough with the reminiscing. It is now time for me to end this episode as it is a little bit overdue. So you can tell from the start of the video what we were doing there and the current time on the calendar it is right now. But we have done some amazing progress in today's episode where we have these two massive storage warehouses along the ocean right here, where we also had some insane amounts of land reclamation we had to do. But it was all worth it, as we have these new massive places for us to store our items, a little bit more organized than it was before, and we also freed up some space in our gate behind us a little bit, and we can eventually turn that into a public place for museum of some sort, as it is a very important site on the server. And I thank you all for watching this video if you have made it this far, and please consider subscribing or commenting if you do wish to do so. But that is all for today. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you, and farewell.